before you begin, you do have a period of 4 minutes for your delegation as well, just as a reminder. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Bisan Zubi. I'm a Palestinian Canadian equity trainer and consultant. I've worked with other school boards, but this is my first time interacting with the OCDSB in this way. However, I attended OCDSB schools from kindergarten to grade 12, Rockcliffe Park Public School in Zone 6, Hopewell Elementary in Zone 9, and Lisgar Collegiate in Zone 10. My family now resides in Zone 4, and my nephew is a current OCDSB student. Growing up, I felt deeply ashamed of being Palestinian, if I'm going to be honest, and I hid that part of me as much as I could. However, in the post 9/11 world, there was no hiding, and I couldn't hide from my identity, couldn't hide from being an Arab, and hide from Islamophobia. The experiences that I had during those times ranged from terrorist Halloween costumes, donning a Palestinian keffiyeh to symbolize the terrorism, to a boy who would scream "sand and word" to me on an OC Transpo bus or in the courtyard. These events and others contributed to me being very scared to embrace my identity and my heritage until my late 20s. Anti-Palestinian racism might be a new concept to some, but there are manifestations that are described across many sources, including framing Palestinian culture or humanity as inherently violent or terroristic, the invisibilization and silencing of Palestinian voices and perspectives, and dismissing Palestinian human rights as anti-Semitic. And let me be clear, Jewish people have been and remain some of the most ardent defenders of Palestinian human rights. And oftentimes APR, anti-Palestinian racism, and anti-Semitism work in tandem and reinforce one another. There are more examples of APR in the handout that you have received. Now, I regret how much of my life I spent hating my identity, and I would never wish that onto any other person. But last year, I was connected with Palestinian Youth Movement Ottawa and learned that OCDSB students not only still face pernicious APR, but in almost all the instances, when they did actually self-advocate, the racist harm was only compounded. I heard from an OCDSB student who, as they walked across the graduation stage, which is arguably like one of the most important symbolic moments of somebody's high school career, who wanted to wear their keffiyeh, arguably one of the most meaningful symbols of Palestinian identity, and they were told this was, quote, inappropriate, unacceptable, and a teacher even went so far as to say, "Don't make a fool out of yourself." Another student shared an incident where a section of their school project that discussed Israel's treatment of Palestinians was removed on the basis it might offend. Another told of a class heritage mapping project where being Palestinian was simply not an option. Another Palestinian student's social media post elicited a call from their school principal and the Ottawa police. First of all, this school board knows very well how criminalizing racialized youth leads to worse outcomes across the board. But when that student tried explaining in a meeting with their principal what they had meant and what the context was, the principal replied, quote, "I don't want to hear anything about geopolitics." We also know that several student protests regarding APR have been staged throughout the OCDSB, including at Wilfrid Laurier Secondary School, AY Jackson, Earl of March, Maryville High, and many other schools. And yet the board and its trustees have failed to act to protect these kids. And this is also noting that the 2019 student census showed that Arabic speakers comprised the second largest majority of at-home language use after English. Anti-Palestinian racism works in tandem with Islamophobia, anti-Arab racism, and other forms of oppression, and must be included in that stream of board equity work. The board can no longer ignore this issue. The board needs to commit to education and awareness about anti-Palestinian racism and how it affects your students and your staff.
Bisan, sorry, hi, would you be able to wrap up your delegation if possible, please?
And it must be incorporated into your equity mandate. There's also an urgent need for an equity role that will combat anti-Arab racism and address the challenges that Arab youth face. This would lead to better outcomes for Arab youth in the OCDSB, better communication and collaboration between the board and local Arab communities, and safer schools that Arab and Palestinian youth, along with OCDSB students and staff of all backgrounds, can thrive in. I'd like to thank you for your time and consideration, and I look forward to hearing any questions you might have on the subject.
Thank you very much for your delegation. Trustee Dixon? Yep.
Hi, Zuma. Thank you for speaking to us. My question is, what are some things that the equity team could do that you think would make OCDSB schools safer space for Palestinian students?
Well, when I spoke with the Palestinian youth movement, they have very clear sets of demands that have been, communicated to the board and that they still really want to see happen. So I would just really like to use this moment to echo their demands, because I think that that should be at the forefront of, the conversation on student safety. So they would like measures to be taken to ensure the safety of Palestinian students and staff in OCDSB schools, and empathizing and understanding what the lived experiences of Palestinians and students and staff look like and feel like. They would like to make sure that the board is including and supporting Palestinian voices within the human rights and equity conversations happening at the board. They would like to assure, they would like Palestinians to be assured that their perspectives and experiences can be shared and are valued by the board, because they don't even think that basic fundamental exists. They want more consultation with Palestinian stakeholders in the community so that there is more input being brought into the board on that level. They want you to provide more mentorship and education opportunities for them, especially representative ones. So from Palestinian leaders and figures that they can look up to and they can see themselves in. They want the OCDSB's human rights framework to be in alignment with other human rights, international human rights frameworks. And they also would like the OCDSB to ensure that the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which Palestinians have identified as harmful to us and harmful to our ability to publicly participate, is not taken, especially when there are other definitions, there are other ways of really solidifying what anti-Semitism is and how it appears, that don't make Palestinian students feel like they have to reassert their humanity, or they have to be, facing different kinds of harm because of that. So those were their demands. I think that they're really important, and I do think it's the board's role to address each and every one of them. And again, so my two kind of recommendations on another level is creating, education specifically about APR within the board. So just, that it's identifiable and that you can see it when it's happening, and it's not necessarily starting from point zero when a student tries to self-advocate. The second thing that I would recommend is an Arab equity position. The reason why I would recommend this is because it's in alignment with your existing equity work. So it makes sense to incorporate it. And it also understands that anti-Arab racism is different than Islamophobia. And so the Peel District School Board, I think recently just did a really groundbreaking, motion on combating Islamophobia. And that's an aside that's also very, very important for this board. But I just don't, I'm careful to not conflate the two. Not all Arabs are Muslims, not all Muslim people are Arabs, not all Palestinians are Muslim. And so really understanding the way that intersecting oppressions are playing out in students and staff's lives, I think is in keeping with your equity mandate, and it's in keeping with the work that you're already doing. So it should hopefully come fairly, organically to the equity team.
Thank you very much for that. I would like to remind trustees that these are questions of clarification based on the delegation. I do see quite a bit of interest. I do have space for 2 more questions. Next on the list, we have Trustee Bell.
Great, thank you very much. My question of clarification, I really
Trustee
appreciate
Bell, we can't hear you.
Okay, shoot. Can you hear me now? So you guys can't hear me, but Nilly can, or Trustee Kaplan-Murth can. So I think it's something with the delegation. I mean, with the technology.
So they can hear me, but you can't hear me.
But I can read what you're saying. So if you just, I can just go ahead and read the captions as you ask your question. I think that'll probably go smoothest.
Can be.
All right, so maybe we will try to follow up with trustee Bell at a later time. Next on our list, we have Seema Lamba.
Please.
Okay, do I have the same issue? Can you hear me?
We also, Seema, apologies, we seem to be having a technical issue here.
Okay.
Anybody know any good jokes?
Can you hear me
Should
now?
we take a break? Should we take a break?
Okay.
So just make that known.
Trustee Bell has indicated on a point of order. We would just like to pause the meeting while we have the technical issue sorted out, if that's all right with everyone.
Thanks.
Yes? Okay.
Can you hear us?
Yes, we can. All right.
You have asked. I have asked trustee.
All right, I'd like to reconvene the meeting if everyone is ready. Director Giroux is going to provide an update for us.
So our apologies for the inconvenience. We appear to be having some sound problems with the 3 committee members who are participating inside the Zoom meeting. It doesn't appear that we have a problem with the live stream. We have been in contact with the supplier. The supplier is sending a technician and a replacement piece of equipment, which we think is causing the problem. But in the interim, we're going to proceed. The sound is working right now. So we will invite, I think trustee Bell was next to ask her question. Manager Guthrie has sent a message to trustee Bell and Seema Lamba, who are the 2 people on the question list. If you can email back your question in the event that we lose your sound, we can provide the question to the chair and then the delegation can respond and we'll get on with the meeting. And hopefully the sound will hold out, but if not, we'll at least have your question and are able to move forward. Thank you.
All right, trustee Bell, whenever you're ready, please.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much for the delegation and for bringing this issue forward. I very much appreciate it. I would like to ask whether or not there is fear of coming forth with these requests. I note that we haven't had very many delegations to speak to this. And the further point of clarification is whether or not you have heard about what the OCDSB is doing that has worked thus far and how we could grow and improve on that. Thank you.
So the first part of that again was if there were changes that would have happened. Sorry, I remember the second part, but the first part of your question, if you could repeat that.
Apologies again, point of order. We unfortunately can't hear the delegate. The first question was if there is fear from the community to come forth with their concerns.
I'm going to just respond, and I hope that you can understand this question, even if there's no audio, even in playback afterwards. There is fear. There is a lot of fear. There is a lot of self-suppression. Like I said, I didn't publicly identify as Palestinian for a really long time until I felt comfortable, until I felt like I was occupying spaces where my identity wouldn't be questioned or where I was strong enough to talk and, and to respond if my identity was questioned. I hear that fear, but I also just, this generation isn't like my generation. They're so connected, and they want to advocate for their rights, and they want to advocate for their humanity. And They are doing that, and they are doing that in their way. I think that more effort could be, shown by the board to bring them in and to, create meaningful points of contact with them. Showing the actions. From what I kind of hear, there have been conversations between PYM Ottawa and, senior leaders in the school board. And those should definitely continue. But I think what they want to see is action coming from those conversations. So they want to see steps taken to act on those conversations and the content of those conversations, because they don't feel that, for example, just a teacher would be able to have, the sensitivity or the resources to to fully accept their Palestinian identity, to really kind of create a safe space for them, right? So this is obviously not a one-off or like a specific situation. This requires education. It requires advocacy, and it's going to be a lot of work, which is why it should be in tandem with the equity work that's already happening. And I do want to really emphasize that this goes hand in hand with an anti-racist school board. And so I think the feedback is more. They need more. They need it to be tangible, and they need it to be. They need to feel safe advocating for themselves, or else they just aren't going to bring their concerns to the board, or it's not going to come up in, productive ways, and it might come up in more, frustrated ways, and then that will further, stigmatize and marginalize these kids, right? So really creating productive spaces and safe spaces for them to be authentically themselves. Like if you haven't done that basic one, there won't be comfort for them to actually self-advocate going further.
Thank you very much. Seema, are you comfortable asking your question and having the text shown to you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So my question is, what do you think of having an Arab equity coach? Would that meet, like in the recommendations you had created an equity position related to, address anti-Palestinian, racism? I say that because at the last COW meeting, we had a long discussion about having a Jewish equity coach and being understanding what that role would be. It's different than other coaches to address anti-Semitism, right? Which would be to, incidences, but also education from the Jewish community to the school board. And so I'm hearing from you right now is like having Palestinian voices, bringing that education and training tools to the school board. So what are your thoughts? I don't know if you were at the last meeting about having an Arab equity coach.
Yeah, I think that is a really tangible step to take, as long as the Arab equity coach understands anti-Palestinian racism and includes that within their framework. I was going through that census, and there are, it's more than just Palestinians. There's a large Lebanese population, Syrian population, Kuwaiti, Moroccan, Arabs are very diverse, and understanding the challenges facing Arab youth, especially in a board like the OCDSB. There was a stat that you have about 10% of your students identify as Arab, with Arabic as their first language, which is double the actual city of Ottawa statistics. So you are overrepresented by Arab youth in your school board. So recognizing that this is that anti-Palestinian racism in particular doesn't simply just affect Palestinians. It like all other forms of oppression, it doesn't actually act logically. It doesn't go, oh, you're not actually Palestinian, you're just Syrian, so I won't apply the same racist lens to you and your experience. It doesn't work that way. So yeah, definitely you have more than a large enough student body that requires this kind of touch point within the board, that requires expertise within the board. And then also think of the added benefit of better outcomes for 10% of your students, more involvement of their families, understanding the different cultural barriers or language barriers that might even just stop parents for advocating for their children, right? All of that is a part of equity work. And all of that, from what I have heard, is sorely desired by Palestinian and Arab identifying students.
Thank you very much, Basan. And thank you to everyone for the questions. Thank you very much for your delegation. You've given us some very important topics and items to consider. And I'm sure that we will be discussing this along. Keeping an eye on the time, I would like to now ask Trustee Lyra to provide your briefing.
All right, so the chair's briefing begins. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the devastating series of earthquakes in parts of Turkey and northern Syria. More than 6,000 people have died and many more are impacted across the region. Our thoughts are with those affected by this disaster and their loved ones here and abroad. There are many families in our community who might be from this area or who have loved ones affected. Should students or families need additional support, they can reach out to their school for help. Second, our partners in the Ottawa the Ottawa Network for Education are looking for community volunteers over the age of 18. A number of opportunities are available, including supporting French immersion programs, helping students receive a healthy breakfast, or reading aloud to children in kindergarten to grade 3. More information can be found on our website. Third, the board's strategic planning process continues. While all of our large public gatherings have concluded, if you have feedback or would like input, please see our website for ways to have your voices heard. And that concludes my report, unless there are questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the chair? Okay, seeing none, moving forward. Director Giroux, would you please provide your briefing?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Wanted to take a minute to talk about the important work that the Education Foundation of Ottawa does, supporting OCDSB students in need across the district. And every February, the Education Foundation holds their annual Toonie Tuesday fundraiser, which is a great and easy way for families and students to help give back to their school community. Students can bring $2 or more to school anytime until Toonie Tuesday on February 21st. Donations are also possible online through the Education Foundation website or through School Cash, the School Cash online account. Last year, we were able to raise $68,000 through Toonie Tuesday, and the goal this year is $80,000. So look forward to your support in helping this important fundraiser. A couple of quick additional reminders. Report cards for secondary students will be sent via email on Friday, and report cards for elementary students will be sent on Wednesday, February the 15th, also by email. Details on how to access report cards were shared in our last parent update. And also a reminder that Friday, February the 17th is a professional activity day for all elementary and secondary students. This is a day that our school-based staff will be engaged in professional learning, and lots of great learning opportunities planned. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the director? All right, seeing none. I would now like to call again upon Director Giroux to introduce report 23-012.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I would invite Associate Director Reynolds to come to the table and share this report.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Director. So I'm pleased to bring forward a recommended school year calendar for the 2023-2024 school year. As you may be aware, it's a process we undertake annually. We are guided by Ministry Regulation 304 that stipulates the conditions for a school year calendar. We do have an internal process through which we consult with members of the bargaining units, students, high school students, and on occasion where there are possibly significant changes as well, the parent community. We haven't done that in a couple of years now, but we still have the data from the last round. What we do know is of most importance to a lot of our community is that key points of the year, particularly winter break and March break, align with the other districts. Parents sometimes have students in multiple districts, sometimes they're parents in one district and employees in another. So we've heard this from a number of different stakeholders. The calendar that is before you does achieve that alignment with the all 4 districts in the city having the same start and end dates for the winter break, same start and end dates for the March break. The actual start and end dates of the school year do have some variance, although we do align with the OCSB, which is good because we are sharing a transportation consortium with them. So the first day of the school year would be the 1st of September, and it would be a PA day, with then students starting on the 5th after the Labor Day long weekend. And the last day is a Thursday, is June 28th, I believe, is the actual last day. The ministry reg also allows for up to 7 PA days in the school year, 3 of which are ministry priority, 4 of which are a district priority. We do have some collective bargaining considerations that we have to be mindful of in those PA days, as several of them are already dedicated for some PD planned by bargaining units, as well as report card writing and parent-teacher interview requirements. But the draft calendar does have those 7 days placed. We try to front load the ministry priority days to basically ensure that our staff are given as much training and staff development at the beginning of the year so that it can guide their practice throughout the year. Although one of them does fall a little bit later in November. And that's partly in response to feedback we heard loud and clear from the secondary students, where the stretch between Thanksgiving after midterm, the start of the second term, through to the winter break can be quite long, and a PA day does help with their well-being, and staff with whom we consulted also agreed. So the calendar that is before you more or less aligns with the ministry template. Does seek alignment for those key breaks with the other districts. We don't have the OCDSB PA days yet, but we did share our days with them in the hope that they may seek to align with us because there is some potential savings for both districts and transportation costs if they do so. And then following this, if the board does approve the calendar at the end of the month, we then would pass it on to the ministry for approval. We're not anticipating any problems with that, as it is, as I mentioned, fairly well aligned to the ministry template calendar. And with that, I'll take any questions.
I saw a question from trustee Blackburn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I'd like to move the recommendation, please.
Okay. Okay, would you like introduction?
Madam Chair, through you, I don't have an introduction. All I'd like to say is I'd like to thank the Associate Director and all the staff that worked on this and look forward to the board approving this quickly. Thank you.
Okay. Trustee Scott. Any questions from you?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one question, because I know that I certainly hear from parents who are concerned about the dates, particularly for Christmas break. So could we please have some clarification on how much of those breaks, like Christmas break and March break, are basically set out by the ministry, and how much leeway we really would have to change them or otherwise?
Sure, absolutely. So the regulation essentially says that a school year will start on the 1st or on or after the 1st of September and will end before or on the 30th of June, that it has to be 194 days, instructional days between the two. And when you plan it out, essentially that takes into consideration 10 days for a winter break and 5 days for a March break. But there is an avenue through the regulation through which you can have exemptions. And we see that in a couple of our coterminous boards that run more of a year-long school system. So they have an additional week in the fall and a couple of weeks in the spring. So there is some flexibility, but the expectation is that there is a spring break and there is a winter break. And as I said, the ministry every year does issue a template or model calendar. Our selected dates align with that template. And we heard generally positive feedback for that from all the stakeholders that we spoke to. So it is possible to alter those things somewhat, but we wouldn't do so without significant consultation.
Thank you for that. I think what's really important, certainly families that travel over the Christmas break sometimes would have difficulty when school is running right up to that Friday before. Certainly that was an issue this year. On the other hand, when the ministry sets their dates for the winter break, usually it shifts by a day every year because the year isn't divisible by 7. And so over a period of time, the amount of time before the major holidays will become longer and longer. Is that correct?
I suppose that is correct. And just to build on that a little bit, although we did hear some voices say that it was challenging to start the holidays so close, and we do have one day better this upcoming year than we do this year. We also heard a lot of positive feedback about it was nice having time after too. So it's one of those things where unfortunately, like many things, probably won't make everybody happy.
Well, half the people can be happy probably most of the time, which is probably the best we can do given the nature of the calendar and the expectations around it, how it must be designed. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Trustee Lyra.
So a growing number of our families are not working 9-to-5 jobs. They're working shift work, they're working evenings. And there's a lot of evidence to show that 3-day weekends are beneficial to the mental health and well-being of people. I'm wondering if the district gave any consideration to closer to a year-long calendar with 4-day weeks every week, with a 3-day weekend, 4-day week for 45, 48 weeks a year.
So through you, Chair, actually, yes, we did this year. Looked at the opportunity of, with the school year starting for staff on the 1st, which is the Friday before the Labor Day, there was an opportunity, say, to extend the school year or start it earlier by saying, we looked at 4 instructional days, which then would allow you to create 4 longer weekends throughout the year as an option. Although it's possible, there are some challenges in that with some of our employee groups, those who collect EI over the course of the summer, for example, some payroll issues, but they're not insurmountable. When we did meet with our committees that had, PICO, CASCA, bargaining unit reps, that idea was received not even lukewarmly. I think they saw real concerns in the extension of the school year, not outweighing the benefits of having more breaks intermittent. But I think it's an idea that we should continue to look at this year in particular. The reason why we put that forward is we did hear an awful lot heading into the winter break that it was such a long stretch through the end of November and into December, and that it was really hard for staff and student well-being. And so we were looking at how do we break that up a little bit. In the end, given we respected the consultation process that we have, they, basically the message was interesting, but we really not interested. Don't think it'll work. But I don't think we walk away from that idea altogether and possibly look at a way to gather a little more information on it going forward.
So this is probably too short for this school calendar, but for the next one, can we get a proposed school calendar that has 3-day weekends most of the year round with a very short summer break as something to consider and bring to our consultation process for the next school calendar?
We'll give some thought to that, and we'll get back to you with how that, because we do have a year. Well, we don't have a year. We'll actually have to do that in the fall because it would be a much more robust consultation exercise. But we'll think a little bit about that. I know I already have a call aligned with I can't remember now.
One of our co-terminus.
Yeah, it does do that to see. One of the things we're interested in is how does that impact student achievement? Because they have schools that have both more of a traditional school year calendar as well as more of the year long. So we want to gather some information from them to help inform that. And so we'll come back to you with some thoughts.
Thanks. Trustee Aziz.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. I have a question regarding a more diverse approach to our calendar and holidays and how much flexibility we could have. I understand the ministry sets guidelines when it comes to like the winter holiday break, which is meant to fall over at Christmas. I also understand that while the majority of our students right now follow a Christian calendar, a growing population celebrate holidays that aren't granted within that winter break. I'm wondering if we have any flexibility, if we've heard anything through consultations about, not just our students, but also, our staff having some of those holidays that aren't already approved by the ministry, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you. And through you, Chair, a good question and one that had crept into the conversation, the planning of this calendar. As you know, we do have, and we were able to get prior to this the list of dates of significance for the upcoming school year, in particular those start dates, the ones that are the do not touch. And we have good alignment, not in terms of providing a day off on those dates, but at least in terms of them not falling on or on any significant school-based events. So we were able to do that so that folks who are entitled to staff or students leave to celebrate or to recognize days of significance can do so more easily without missing out on a more significant school-based event. The option that would be there would be, and somewhat aligned with the year-long approach, it would be creating what's called board holidays, which the regulation does allow. Basically, you still have to have 194 school days. So if you want to create additional holidays throughout the school year from September 1 to June 30th, roughly, you need to then stretch that school year to get your 194 days to create whichever board holidays you think you need to create. That, given the broad range of dates of significance that people in our community do recognize, that could be challenging to do year over year, possibly, but I think it's a conversation that we need to continue to have. But I think we're early in our thinking and learning on that one, and how the community might best respond to that.
Sure. And if I can ask a follow-up question, thank you for that response. And I completely appreciate that this can get messy. I'm wondering if it's possible, if not already done, if our staff are provided with important dates outside of just Christmas, et cetera, just so that they're aware, okay, we don't want to plan this on Eid or something. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's those start dates. So it's attached to a procedure that we have. Okay. Which we recently, I can't remember the name of it, but it basically talks about dates of observance, dates of significance.
Yeah.
It's updated, or I don't know if we put the updated thing on the procedure every year, because I'm not sure we got last year's, but it's posted to the website and it's embedded in the calendar.
Yeah.
And it does list all the key dates of significance. And the start dates are the ones that would be considered, say, a high holiday or a major holiday, or a key date to other cultural group that may not be a religious. Right. And we do have that message that no field trips, major or assessments, things of that nature are planned on those dates.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Trustee Blackburn, would you like wrap up?
No.
Okay. All right. That being said, I'd like to call the vote. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, and that is passed unanimously. Carried. Okay. I would now like to call for a mover to receive the report from the Parent Involvement Committee dated 23 November 2022. Moved by Trustee Nash. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I will now call the vote to receive the report. All those in favor? Okay, and that carries. I would now like to call for a mover to receive the report from the Indigenous Education Council dated December 15th, 2022. Okay, Trustee Dixon.
Our point of clarification, Madam Chair. Yes. I just don't want to forget the folks that are on Zoom who are voting, just to make sure that we're not voting.
Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, because I would totally miss that
point, Trustee Aziz. Okay, are there any errors or omissions in the report from the Indigenous Education Council? Seeing none, I would like to call the vote to receive the report. All those in favor? Okay, that carries. I would now like to call for a mover to receive the report from the Special Education Advisory Committee dated January 11th. I see Trustee Kaplan-Murph. Okay, are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor? That carries. Thank you. I would now like to call upon Director Giroux to introduce report 23-008.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I am delighted to invite Associate Director Reynolds back. You can see he's been very busy catching up on school operations issues, and we're going to talk a little bit about the field trips policy. Associate Director.
Great. Thank you. And through you, Madam Chair. So for the last, it's been a little while now, I really started before the pandemic, staff have been taking a look at our field trip procedures. The procedures that accompany the field trip policy. And we feel there's a lot of work that needs to be done there to modernize them, to have them more accurately reflect the work that is happening in schools around field trips, make them more user-friendly, increase accountability, promote safety, and ensure that field trips that are approved by the district really are rich learning or experiential opportunities that hopefully enhance the curriculum promote student well-being, and that students and parents who are accessing those, and parents I say because they often pay the bill, are getting the best value, dollar value for that experience, that they're reasonably priced and that they're accessible. In addition to that, there's just the modernization around how we accommodate students, the range of needs or identities that we need to be knowledgeable of, and so that these trips, these experiences are as accessible as they possibly can be. Part of that work obviously was taking a look at the field trip procedure, policy, sorry. The policy compared to the procedure is much more high level, much more guiding. The procedures are where you really get into the nuts and bolts of how things happen. So I know often when we have conversations around field trips, a lot of the questions are more about the procedure, the how. So what we've brought before you this evening is a revised, updated policy that's really seeking to align the field trip policy with the work that's being undertaken around equity and human rights in all of our policies, and to ensure that it is in the new template, the new format, and some of the key changes that you see in there, if you were looking at the old and the new, and they are both available in there. Once a link a little bit further on in the material. We have the title change. We have the inclusion of the board commitment statement to Indigenous rights, human rights, and equity. A new rationale section that clarifies the legislative authority of the board to run field trips. Moving procedural content such as parental consent forms from the policy to a revised field trip procedure, which I said is underway. Emphasizing the board's duty to accommodate and to eliminate barriers for all students wishing to participate. We do want to remove the requirement of schools to consult with their school councils when establishing an educational framework. That was language in the old policy. And frankly, it just didn't really happen. It's not that we don't consult with school councils on significant moves, but especially in some schools, and if you've recently been parents, there's a number of field trip opportunities running as we get back up and going. Especially, in secondary schools, it can be everything from a last minute one-day trip for a team that's going to a tournament. So the idea that school council is involved in planning that framework on an ongoing basis was just it doesn't reflect actual practice in the schools. And expanding on the delegation to the director to develop procedures to include specific expectations for what to include in the procedures, which you can see there as you read through it. In alignment with the new policy framework, we've determined that this is a tier 2 policy revision, and hopefully, this language in here to remind you of what that means. Essentially, it requires some consultation internal, which we've undertaken with key stakeholders, as well as some public, and we're doing that through our website, but not the same extensive consultation that a tier 3 might require. But it's more than just housekeeping. As you can see, it's been reordered a little bit and the language has been tidied up. So it's brought before you for discussion. It will come back in March for hopefully for approval. So we really welcome this conversation to hear your thoughts on the policy and try to answer any questions. And in many cases, it may be I'm really hearing feedback and input that will help shape or guide the procedure and its development, and may not necessarily actually belong in the policy. So hopefully, if you've had a chance to read through it, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I see your question from Trustee Lyra.
You see several questions from Trustee Lyra.
Okay.
So my first question is 3.3b says that field trips shall be offered at a minimal cost to students. Do you mean a minimal cost as in we're going to try and keep the price of our field trips as low as possible? Or is the goal to make sure that students and families are paying as little as possible? Because those are different goals.
And it is something that we just actually had a discussion about earlier in the day as we took another look through this. The intention is that in planning a field trip, all efforts should be made to keep the cost as low as possible. It does not mean that there would not be field trips that are expensive. Some of them are. And I think of a cultural exchange that has been organized over a period of years by a school where they've done a lot of rich learning about the culture, about the language. And then it culminates in a trip, overseas. That trip will be expensive, relatively compared to a day trip to a museum. But the efforts need to be made there too. And this will be fleshed out further in the procedure. And I think we may want to tinker with the wording here. We want to keep it as low as possible for what the experience is, but it doesn't mean that everything would be of a minimal cost. So we may need to change that word.
Okay. My second sort of point in question is that there are a lot of people in poverty who see the big trip, like there's often one big trip in high school. For a long time, they were like music trips to Europe, or they would be the drama trip to Stratford, or they would be the one big experiential trip. Students who live or grew up in poverty wouldn't have a chance to go on vacation to other places. And so I'm wondering if the intention of this policy is to remove those big experiential trips, because those are going to be expensive. But I think my initial thought is that if we are removing them as a goal or as a thing that we are intending to offer, what loss is there to people who wouldn't get those kind of experiences in other ways?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Our goal is not to remove those trips. Our goal is to ensure that they are reflecting high quality learning. So some trips, and you will hear some conversation, and this is a shift that's come a little bit coming out of the pandemic where we didn't run trips. It was a natural opportunity to take a look at things again as we start to bring things back online. But as I mentioned, this work had begun before. Where we've had trips that really do reflect more or less just travel and tourism. That's not really the objective of the school board. It doesn't mean that we don't have overseas trips, but we want to ensure that they represent high quality learning, a high quality education experience. And yes, those trips, at least historically, I'd say they're not even accessible, not just accessible to people who live in poverty. I know I had 2 children go through high school, and we were not spending thousands of dollars to send the children on those trips. That being said, part of what the procedure is going to drive towards is making it very clear that there is financial assistance for those who wish to participate and may not be able to afford it. Also making it very clear and encouraging schools to engage in maybe not having as many trips. Like you said, the one big trip where, and we do have some schools that follow this plan where it's identified years in advance and there's fundraising opportunities between the planning stage and the actual trip, so that costs just are reduced, so we're very mindful, and our senior team is very mindful of big ticket trips that don't necessarily invite people who need support to get that support, and also ones that are not necessarily offering a very high degree of learning in exchange for it.
I'm really glad you mentioned fundraising, because that was on my list of questions. So when you look at fundraising opportunities, a lot of fundraising is you bug your parents, friends, you bug your neighbors. And if you live in a wealthy area, if you have parents with wealthy friends, that's a great way of fundraising. If you live in an area which is struggling with poverty, all of your neighbors are broke, all of your parents are broke, and all of their friends are broke, or many of their friends are broke. And so it can be a lot more difficult to fundraise to an end. And I'm wondering, is fundraising the only method that we are intending to use to reduce the cost of trips?
No, it's not the only method. Already in place, where a school is running a trip, they are to have financial support available to anyone seeking to go. But the barrier there is that someone has to ask, essentially. And we want to try to make that a little, and that's something we're working on, proceduralizing how people don't have to raise their hand and say, I'm in poverty, could you please help me? Because that, you may not have a lot of money, but you probably have a great deal of dignity, and we don't want to do anything to violate that. Fundraising allows for that, because then people don't have to self-identify. It just brings the cost down. So financial assistance, yes, there are also some bursaries and whatnot available through OCNet. That remains there. The fundraising is a good option, but maybe also looking at different models of fundraising. For example, it doesn't have to be, the bake sale or the selling the whatever door to door, which we don't do anymore anyway, but that might be what you recall. But partnerships with, other schools where fundraising happens more readily, taking a look at some of the money that is being generated through all existing international experiences and maybe using that to help support schools too. We'll be looking at some different ways to offset those costs.
Okay, I'm going to let other people take a crack at you, and I might come back around.
Thank you.
Next on the list, we have Lily Miller. Please go ahead. Lily, we can't hear you. Are you maybe on mute? No.
Just to see if we can hear. So
Lily, would you be able to put your question in the chat box? All right. Apologies, Lily. We are going to see if you can either put your question in the chat box or if you can email it in so that Director Reynolds can take a crack at it. Or sorry, yeah, Superintendent Reynolds.
Associate Director.
Associate Director. Pardon me. My apologies. Still learning all the.
No one.
Right, Lily, we're just going to move to another question while we're getting yours ready, okay? So next on the list, I have Trustee Milburn.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So through you, my question is, I do understand that it did not always happen, that the consultation with school councils. Have you had any feedback about removing the consultation with them though from this policy?
No, we have not. It's been posted. We haven't expressly asked PIC. We could do so in the era, but no, today we have not, through our posting, to the best of my knowledge, received any feedback.
Okay. I think it would be good if we did ask PIC, because I'm sure having it actually removed from the policy, they'll have different views now. But with that said, do you have any plans in place to kind of consult on field trips on a school by school basis? Because there are parent councils and school councils that are very involved.
So no is the short answer. And I don't, yes and no. Let me explain it. No, in the form of a consultation kind of process that we may think of, but all field trips are, especially the more significant ones, do have requirements, for example, of parent meetings and student meetings who are interested. That is again written into the procedure, particularly if you're looking at a trip with extensive travel, where parents have an opportunity to come in and give feedback and ask questions. All trips are voluntary. Many of them are just driven by curricular expectations or athletics, which is slightly different, but where it is a larger trip that would require a significant or more significant investment from parents or students in that trip, there are mechanisms to hold information sessions so that they have an opportunity to ask their questions and give input.
All right, perfect. Thank you. And that is all my questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next we have Donna Dixon, or Trustee Dixon. Apologies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my question would be, when it comes to letting the students know, like financial wise, when you do the trip or whatever, how do you let students know that want to go, that if they don't have it, they're going to be able to help? Because I think that's one of the big barriers. If we want to make it feasible to everybody, if the kids that are poor don't know, they're not going to be able to come forward, right? So how do you do that? So what do you have in place?
The new procedure will have a section on communication and promotion of trips that will put out the requirements of what is communicated and when in the process to parents and students, and that, as well as anyone who may need other accommodation to participate, will be made clear during that time. So materials that are put out by teachers or whomever is running the trip to say, we are planning this trip, whether it's to a class or to a club or open, will have to communicate as part of that promotion, not only where they're going and why they're going and all the great things that'll happen, but also that students will be invited to indicate whether or not they need assistance financially or they need some other accommodation. We think of students who may be using wheelchairs for mobility. A lot of them might assume that they couldn't participate in certain trips because of travel or whatnot. We want to make sure that they know that they can. So it will be in the procedure around the communication and promotion section, and it'll be embedded along the way. So that'll be when they first become aware of the trip, and when a parent, guardian, student completes the paperwork to go. We're going to move that to an electronic format, and there will be opportunities to say, I need this or I need that, and so they'll be able to do so kind of anonymously and confidentially right in the paperwork as they complete it. So that should help.
Okay, I'm going to ask Manager Guthrie to read out the question from Lily Miller for you.
Sorry, this is from the chat. There's a few qualifying statements before the actual question. So you said eliminate barriers, rich learning experiences, high quality learning, making clear that there is financial assistance. You said in the preamble, protect Indigenous rights, human rights, and equity to seek and address and eliminate racism. These trips that do indeed provide rich learning experiences are not available to those families with financial struggles. How is this supporting human rights, equitable access to education? How are you reconciling this?
So thank you for the question. As mentioned, the new procedure will emphasize the importance of ensuring that trips that are running do represent fair value, good value to those that are having to, contribute to it financially. And we've already started to implement that. For example, a trip recently came forward for a purely optional event that was not reflective of the curricular learning and did not represent a rich experience, and it was $700 or something per student, and staff said no to that trip because it was unduly expensive for what it was, and it didn't represent a rich learning experience. It is not our intention to cancel these trips, the more substantive ones, as mentioned. But it is our intention to make sure that schools understand that they have an obligation in running a field trip to ensure that any student can access it. And that does include promoting and making them aware that financial assistance would be available to those who can't afford it, as well as looking at other means to reduce the costs overall, such as fundraising as discussed, as well as any other barriers. Furthermore, one of the things that the procedure will continue to stipulate through the human rights lens and the culturally responsive and relevant pedagogy lens is eliminating. We will not be approving trips that are, what's the word I'm looking for, that students who identify or have certain identities, may not be comfortable participating in because the learning material there or the participatory material is culturally insensitive. For example, bad example, but one that has happened in the past. Certain trips have gone to places that have been called pioneer villages. Well, we're not going to endorse that anymore, and for reasons that I think folks here would understand as we look to promote decolonization. So those are some of the examples in which we hope to move this forward. Will all of our trips be readily affordable to all people? There will still be trips that have larger price tags attached to them, I anticipate, but there will be a greater accountability for school staff to ensure that those who wish to participate and can't afford it are given opportunity to. I hope that addresses the question.
Just one suggestion that I will offer that Lily has shared, that offering financial assistance be a part of the policy, and just a comment that the word minimal is subjective. And those were all of the comments and questions from Lily. I hope I got that, Lily.
Perfect. Thank you, Lily. Next on my list, I have Trustee Aziz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, thank you, Associate Director Reynolds, right?
Yeah, you nailed
it. That's only because Amanda learned, and so I learned. Teamwork. And bear with me because some of these questions might not seem related to the policy, but I'm just trying to understand this in context. You mentioned updating the procedures. We have the three procedures, as you know, the international overnight. Are those being updated in tandem? Or is it just going to be one big update, like a software update?
No, so the intention is to, thank you for the question. The intention is to consolidate them into one.
Okay.
And trying to change the lens through which we view trips. Again, when we, we're moving, still in the process of moving through this, so this conversation is helpful to me. But we're looking at trips a little bit differently. For example, right now the procedures are organized by day, overnight, and international. When really, a trip to upstate New York would be an international trip, whereas a trip to none of it would be just an overnight trip. And that just doesn't make good sense in terms of the strategies that should be in place for risk management and things of that nature. So we're merging it into one, and we're kind of recategorizing trips around the level of risk that might be there and the mitigation strategies that would have to be used to offset those.
I apologize, Madam Chair. I've got a few questions. Thank you. That answers 2 sub-questions, so that's perfect. Do we currently collect data on students who receive financial assistance for the sake of keeping track of which of our field trips are more accessible than others, which schools are being more impacted, et cetera?
No, we don't presently do that at the district level. It's likely done at the school level.
And we don't consolidate that data?
No, and we don't have a requirement that it be done over time at the school level. But the schools do keep track of individuals for their time at the school. But we don't have that centralized, no. We do have the international and overnight trips centralized in terms of what the costs are and what mitigating measures are in there around fundraising. That's in the current paperwork, but not individuals accessing support.
I'm wondering, in tandem with our commitment to human rights and equity, as mentioned in the revisions, if this is a procedural versus policy change, please correct me. If we could collect anonymous data on, which trips, where, and how many students are needing financial assistance, the costs to the board, not to cut off financial assistance, but so that we can make better budget assessments, and understanding, maybe region by region, and I'm open to working with staff on understanding, where are we with these trips, and which trips, are needing the most assistance from our students. And my final question, if I may, is I think building on what Lily had mentioned. Am I in trouble?
Some of the staff had dozed off, and we just wanted to go back out.
Okay, so it wasn't me. Do we consult with our Indigenous partners if we do offsite field trips?
Sorry, for any offsite trip?
So you were sleeping? No. IT. Do we consult with our Indigenous partners?
So I just clarification.
Yeah,
so I guess what you're asking for. When you said off-site, that's the word you.
Yes.
So they're all off. So any field trip is off-site.
By definition.
Right.
But if they're not visiting another school, or if they're not visiting something within their own community, if they're going, to Toronto, are they chatting with, or in the spirit of reconciliation, speaking with our Indigenous partners about how to do that in a reconciliatory manner?
So not for every trip, no. And it wasn't contemplated as a requirement for trips that would either be serving to try to advance Indigenous education, absolutely. Or when we're doing trips specifically for those students who identify as Indigenous, to the land, absolutely. They are, our Indigenous team is front and center, including community partners in that planning. Or if we had questions around, something, and I guess we could run the risk of missing something, but the policy and the work that's done there is getting feedback from our Indigenous education team, as well as our human rights folks and our equity team, so they'll have an opportunity to flag anything that's a concern, but we wouldn't necessarily, again, when we're, as now, we run hundreds of field trips a day.
Yeah.
And so if we weren't somewhat selective, I just don't think we would have the people power to vet them all, if you know what I mean. I'm
just wondering if this was raised with our Indigenous partners that, for any trips that are outside of the territory that we, and again, this might sound limiting, but outside of territory that we acknowledge in our day-to-day in schools, just for example, to build off the example of going to New York before the trip, having a policy of just so our students and staff are aware we're stepping outside of this territory and entering the territory of the, like a.
So you're looking for like a built-in acknowledgement of which territories will be
Just,
participating?
and again, this is me
Sure, you're thinking-
not being the Indigenous partner that I would hope would be consulted, but
Okay.
I'm wondering if that's something we can go back to them about.
I can ask that question.
Thank you. Thank you for bearing with me. And I hope
No
I didn't set something on fire. I don't know what that was. Yeah, I know.
All right, next we have a question from Stima Lamba. Manager Guthrie, would you be able to read that out for us?
There are 3 questions. Do you have data about what each school has as field trips? And if so, was a discrepancy between types of field trips between different schools, socio and economic schools, for example, music trip to Europe, geography trips, history trips, etc.? If not, is there any plan to gather this data?
So thank you. And through you, Madam Chair, we do know which schools are running which overnight and out of town trips, which I think it's probably more what the question's pertaining to as opposed to day trips. And we do notice historically discrepancies between communities in more affluent neighborhoods running more international and out of town trips and schools in less affluent communities running fewer of those opportunities. And that's something we want to seek to correct. And some of the conversations around exploring the possibilities of partner schools or whatnot to allow, not that schools, particularly secondary schools, and this is mostly a secondary school thing, in communities that might be recognized as underserved or they do have some of those opportunities for their students, but not as many. And that is one of the things through the procedure and through change in staff practice, we do want to try to reconcile a little bit.
The second question from Seema, why were school councils not consulted as it was required in the previous policy?
So I think many years ago, it just, and we checked in with a number of schools and principals who've been in the role for a long time. It fell out of habit of practice. There was consultation with school councils where, say, a school was involved in planning a multi-year trip. And what I mean by a multi-year trip is not that they travel for multi-years, but that they will be undertaking significant fundraising events to support a trip many years from now. But in the day-to-day operation of a school, again, all field trips include everything from the 8 times the volleyball team goes out, and many of our schools run 30 teams, through to the 3 students that are popping over to another school to explore learning opportunities there. They're all field trips. And it just really wasn't practicable to involve school councils in providing feedback on all of them. The framework that was referred to in the old policy, we feel really has been replaced by the district procedures that do provide a clear educational framework through which trips must be approved or under which trips must be approved.
And third and final question from Seema, what is the actual human rights lens put into practice in determining field trips? For example, a destination that may be unsafe for particular communities or have difficulties with getting through the border, etc.
So, and a good question. And it's an area where we are all continuing to learn and hone those skills. We do work with our Office of the Human Rights and Equity Advisor, but we are counting on staff who are constantly being trained and educated to provide that lens initially. And for the more complex trips, they do go through several layers of screening from first at the trip supervisor, lead supervisor level through to the principal level. Pardon me. Sorry about that. Then to the superintendent, and in some cases, even the superintendents and team. And so there are opportunities to ask those questions. Will some of those things potentially be missed as we continue to learn? Yes, but hopefully our staff and students and parents will also support us in pointing out some of those concerns as we organize trips. And if we organize a trip where there are barriers, then it's on us to come up with an alternative, and I mean an alternative trip or an alternative measure, so that students can participate and not just run those trips where we know there are barriers. But it is very much a work in progress.
All right, I would like to ensure that all of our first time speakers have a chance, and also being mindful of time. We do have some other big items to move through, so we can all keep that in mind as we ask our question. Next on the list, I have Trustee Scott as the first time speaker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm looking at the definitions in this, and I see that the definition of field trips says this does not include competitive athletics. And I guess I'm wondering why not include competitive athletics? And depending on the answer, I may have a corollary question.
Thank you. So our intention is, as we develop the new procedure, to also develop a new policy that will treat the sanctioned athletic events as a separate type of trip. Still a field trip, there'll still be a procedure, we'll still run them. But the reason being that two things. There are different questions and protocols that typically need to be asked or educated as part of planning those trips, particularly around concussion, for example, or also risk of injury through participation. So it would be much more minded that way. Additionally, although, you know, participating in the volleyball team, to use the example before, may be a very good experiential or well-being activity for that student, it isn't really a rich learning opportunity, at least, you know, not in the way that we tend to view things through the curriculum. So the athletic participation trip procedure and forms will be tailored to those multiple events, because again, typically a field trip is a one-time thing with a start and end, whereas if you know, our coaches have been in the process for years of taking our field trip forms and our athletic participation form and trying to merge the two of them together into something that worked for 8 away games in a tournament. And we want to design something specifically for that doesn't then cause us to change how we interpret the things in our instructional and curriculum based trips, if that makes sense. So it's still going to happen, but it would be handled procedurally differently.
Thank you for that explanation. That does make a certain amount of sense, but it still leaves me with the question about what about other kinds of competition where our students are competing, for example, in music, where I know that some of our students taking culinary arts participate in various competitions and do very well in those. So there are a bunch of other kinds of competition that are not sports or athletics related. So where do those fit? If we are not including competitive athletics, I guess I when I see that as sole thing, I have to ask, well, what about the other kinds of competition?
So through you, Madam Chair, those are very much here and in this procedure. The ones that you just mentioned would be very much curriculum driven. Students who are almost exclusively, not entirely, but almost exclusively in our high school or intermediate bands are in the music program. And it is a credit generating program. It is curriculumly driven is what I'm saying. Same with the culinary arts programs. That is embedded in curriculum. Or students who compete in, say a coding event or a STEM related event or STEAM related event. Those all have direct ties to the curriculum for those students typically participating. Whereas, the athletics, yes, you could say, oh, this ties into the health and physical education curriculum, but really it's a bit of a loose connection. They're a team, they're not members of classes or longstanding clubs. It's kind of a moment in time, it's a winter season. And we just felt that would be better handled in a separate procedure. But those other opportunities are still permitted through this.
I think it would be helpful if the definition were not quite so narrow, and that there were recognition that there are other kinds of competitive activity that are curriculum related that would be classed under the field trips piece. Because otherwise people will look at that and say, well, how come athletics are getting something different here? The other thing I wanted to mention was the challenge of the students in need, because certainly there are a lot of trips that have been organized. The French class that goes to Quebec City or Montreal or wherever, that that can be quite expensive for families. And I guess the other question is around things like the ski trips and so on, which may be tied to the health and physical education curriculum, but certainly are not accessible for a lot of students, either because they don't have the necessary equipment or they don't have the money to go. And so what's going to happen to those within the context of this policy? And I would like to also note my agreement with the comment by Ms. Miller about minimal not being the best word to use in terms of when we talk about cost.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. We certainly, have already acknowledged and that minimal needs to be worked on. So we will do so. And again, those at the risk of repeating myself, we do have intentions to encourage measures to be taken to keep costs low, to make the offer of financial support very clear and upfront, so that students can hopefully avail themselves of it. The only other option really, if we were still worried about that, would be through this policy, the board to say, we won't be running those trips. And if that's the direction where the board wants to go, then certainly, through policy, that is your purview. It would be a real shift of culture, but otherwise we'll have to, rely on the measures that we have mentioned to help try to ensure trips are accessible and that students who do need financial support are aware that it's available to them and are able to access it in a way that safeguards their dignity.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to our second time speakers list. First up, we have Trustee Lyra.
I'm back. So my first question is about if any consideration has been given to shifting away from fundraising being an expectation of an individual and more towards a class. So if you have an activity that is going to cost more than X dollars per student or more than X dollars total, instead of having it be every student needs to try and bring in $400 or fundraise that much, shift it to the class needs to fundraise, I don't know, math, $10,000.
So our vision of fundraising, as we're seeing it through the procedure, is not individuals to offset their own costs. It would be the group that is planning the trip collectively to offset everybody's costs. Mm-hmm. That is the vision.
Okay. And then my second point was to build off of what Trustee Scott said. I think there can be a distinction between extracurricular field trips and curricular field trips. So whether that is the jazz band you have to apply for, which is not the regular band, or whether that's the volleyball team you have to apply for versus gym class. I think there is some distinction that can be drawn between extracurricular field trips and curricular field trips. And I just think that we need to make sure that the extracurricular field trips don't turn into, well, we wanted to visit Montreal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so certainly, when we say curricular connection, we do mean outside of class. It doesn't all have to be classes, absolutely, but that it is offering a rich learning opportunity, and we tend to assess learning against the Ontario curriculum, right? So many of these trips that will be taken will be a club or a student group that is doing so outside or extra to the curriculum, but the learning is reflective of the Ontario curriculum. Again, athletics, and particularly secondary athletics, just to try to get a field trip procedure that worked for everything else to also work for particularly secondary athletics was just problematic enough that we think that there should just be an athletics procedure that will have many of the same elements, but it just will allow the flexibility or the particulars that need to happen. So it's not to draw a distinction between extracurricular, curricular, athletics. It's really just athletics is a different animal somewhat. And so we're going to treat it that way instead of trying to make that round peg fit into this square hole.
Will that policy also be coming forward in March?
Yep.
Okay.
Probably not March, but before any procedural changes happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And next we have Lily Miller. Lily, would you like to test the sound system and see if you can verbalize your question?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay, good. Yes, so it's such a small little policy, but it has such a big impact because with kids and youth, those experiential learning opportunities are can change a lot in the way in what they want to learn, their attitude about learning, and you know, relationships in the classroom. So they're super important. So that's why I think it's very, very sad that the gap that already exists in society, those barriers that where the have-nots, you know, they do what they can, and the haves have these rich experiences, you know, in the summer and you know, with their families, and that's great. But for the school system to support that divide, that's sad to me. So I know you're saying you're trying, and but I would really love that divide not exist. And however you do it. Because if we have, you know, a group of students going off to Montreal and having, you know, a rich learning experience, and we have, you know, another group who can't go, that's not equity. That's not equality. And I'm not just talking about the big trips either. I'm talking about, I mean, I'm not sure if everyone understands like how little money so many families have. If you have, you know, more than one or two kids, like there is $5 is a lot, you know? So I just want to like emphasize that preventing those families, basically punishing those families for not having the resources, those kids by not having the opportunity to experience those learning opportunities, it's disappointing, and it's not equity. My question is also about diversity in the types of field trips that are taken. I wonder if there's any thought to encouraging schools or tracking what kinds of field trips they have, if there could be opportunities to, you know, like one of the other speakers was saying, you know, even talking about the territory that you're on. But I think that there is an opportunity there to insert diversity into the planning of field trips.
I thank you through you, Madam Chair. I do think there's an opportunity there, and it's an opportunity that has been taken, you know, over the last several years, and how the district may, and some of our partners may choose to promote certain trip opportunities to students. For example, we work with OCNet, who has access to some trips that do try to promote different cultural experiences, whether within Canada or outside of Canada, and seek some funding. For example, there are some groups that will pay for any high school group that wants, or maybe just not high school, might be intermediate as well, to visit certain partner Indigenous communities, and then those trips become fully funded. And so we choose to promote those types of trips to schools as, hey, this is something you may want to do. We are considering also trying to identify what's the word I'm looking for? You know, approved vendors who may better serve or provide experiential learning that better reflects, you know, the students that are in our schools. Again, it'll be a work in progress, but there is you know, to your point, there is an opportunity here, and we'll have to keep pursuing that opportunity.
Thank you very much, Associate Director Reynolds, for the report, and thank you to everyone for your very thoughtful comments and questions. I would now like to call upon Director Giroux to introduce report 23-010.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. We are fortunate tonight to have several rich reports. This report is about specialized program classes and was written with the goal of helping trustees to understand the specialized program class structure and how we make decisions regarding those things, and should be useful before we get to academic staffing and budget decisions. I will turn things over to the superintendent and manager for introduction and to respond to any questions.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. We're just getting into the meeting to start our presentation.
Madam Chair, point of clarification or point of order, actually. I'm wondering if we've lost Justine and if we're able to reach her. Mike, did we lose her?
Justine is on. Thank you very much, trustees.
Okay, sweet. That's my bad. I can't see the screen.
Madam Chair, thank you for your patience as we've gotten up and running. I am joined by Manager Kay, manager in Learning Support Services. Also online, we are also joined by Maya Kishida, Supervisor of Speech and Language Pathology and Occupational Therapy, and Dr. Kristen Schaub, Supervisor of Psychological Services. Just confirming with Mike that we're good with the stream and all of that. Thank you. So what you have before you is an annual report of data collection and analysis, which we in Learning Support Services use to support our decision making in planning for student support moving forward. But it's also an important report for trustees. And of course, we reviewed this report with the Special Education Advisory Committee last week as well, as you contemplate policy decisions and directions. Unlike previous years, we have provided additional information, recognizing that many of the members of CEAC and many of the members of the Board of Trustees are new to this process. Our specialized program class model is complex, it's cost intensive, and it's deep rooted in the OCDSB. We've spoken about some of the challenges we faced with the previous board. We've spoken about some of the challenges that we continue to face with CEAC, and we're going to get into a few more of those challenges and opportunities as we go through the presentation. So we wanted to share some information about the special education delivery model. It's outlined by the province. However, there are areas where we have discretion at the local level, and what you end up seeing is many different models of special education, delivery of special education programs and services across the province. For example, we are a district that offers special education programs in the regular class right through to special education classes, fully self-contained as defined in regulation. There are many districts across the province where they don't offer fully self-contained special education classes. An area that we don't have flexibility over is the class size ratios. They are determined in legislation for special education classes. Interestingly enough, they refer specifically to teacher-student ratios and don't take into consideration the paraprofessionals that go into supporting students with special education needs, like educational assistants or the cadre of central and staff and professional student support staff, psychologists, social workers, speech and language pathologists, and so on, who also go into creating a comprehensive special education model. We certainly recognize that a continuum of special education programs and services is required. And I think we recognize that those with the most complex needs deserve the highest proportion of the resources that are dedicated towards meeting their needs. We're also aware that education research, practices, and strategies continue to evolve and are showing us that there are multiple ways to meet the needs of students with special education needs. So we're starting to ask ourselves some questions as we go through this. We've been working at this for a little while. But for example, how do we reconcile, and pardon me, I'm going to read, but how do we reconcile the limited resources available when we're so heavily invested in one model of program delivery and the importance of looking at program pathways, trajectories, and disproportionate impacts that may occur based on identity or intersections of identity? So as I mentioned at SEAC, we don't have all the answers to the challenges that we're going to face. This was brought to you intentionally as a discussion report because there are no foregone conclusions, and we want to engage in a discussion and hear from you. From your lens, what stands out? What considerations should we be taking into account as we look at the data that Manager Kay is going to take us through? Does the approach we've adopted in the OCDSB continue to serve the students best when we consider broader learning around equity, inclusion, human rights, educational research, and eliminating barriers? It's a huge question, and I don't expect us to answer that tonight, but it is the kind of question that is in our minds daily as we work to support students with special education needs across the district. So this, I hope, is the beginning of a conversation for us that we can continue to reflect on and go deeper in as we work our way through this. So there is quite a bit of information that we're going to go through, but I'll turn it over to Manager Kay to take us through some of the key data pieces.
Thank you, Superintendent Simmons. Where we're going to move to is a high-level overview of the data that is presented in tables 1 through 4 that are found in the appendix of this report. Presently, the district has approximately 2,000 learners that are placed in specialized program classes through the IPRC process, the Identification Placement Review Committee. The data overall does then indicate that wait lists for specialized program classes are low. There is a significant exception, and that is autism spectrum disorders, where we continue to see a large number of students waiting for this type of class. I will circle back with more specific information in this in just a moment. Arguably, the more important question regarding SPC data is how we have come to have low wait lists for specialized program classes. This has been accomplished through a very intentional planning process that really begins in November of each year and continues into the late spring. The work involves analysis of student needs and SPC student cohorts across the district. And this results in recommendations to open classes, to close classes, to move classes that is brought annually to this committee for approval through academic staffing. Management of the SPC structure does require significant central supports, including the LSS leadership team, our learning support consultants, and various professional support staff. These are certainly decisions that we don't take lightly, as we appreciate that it can be highly disruptive to a specific group of students that it directly impacts, and certainly for the school teams that are accommodating these changes. I'll ask you to advance the slide. Coming back to our autism spectrum disorder specialized program classes. The district has opened 33 new ASD classes across the last 10 years. This has included 20 new elementary and 13 new secondary classes to bring us to our current total, where we have 56 ASD classes, 36 at the elementary level and 20 at secondary. In Superintendent Simmons' presentation, he outlined some of the regulations that affect fully self-contained classes, and ASD is an example. This is a low ratio class with our highest staff ratio
across the district, where we have 1 teacher to 6 students to align to the ratios outlined in the Education Act, as well as 2 educational assistants, which has been our district practice. Within the current model, students who access elementary ASD classes almost always transition to secondary ASD classes. Therefore, we're now in the position of needing to add 2 to 3 new secondary positions each year just to accommodate the grade 8 students that are transitioning to grade 9. And this is a trend that we would anticipate continuing until our elementary and secondary class availability equalizes. To put all of this into context, to eliminate our current wait list of 46 elementary students, we would need another increase of 17%, or roughly 8 elementary classes. The district certainly does face issues related to sustainability of the current model, and therefore, through the annual planning process, LSS has begun to implement alternative supports, such as the ASD DD itinerant teacher model. We are also working with teams to consider this question, and that is, as educational research continues to emerge and a deeper understanding of inclusion and inclusive design continues to grow, is the model that we have today, is the current model the model that we would actually construct today? Superintendent Simmons referenced the rich discussion that we had with our Special Education Advisory Committee last week, which also surfaced that this model was initially designed when a much smaller group of students that present with complex presentations of ASD were present in the district. And with those smaller numbers, satellite sites made sense to capitalize on resources and staff expertise. The specific question that did arise was, how do we transform a system where students with complex ASD profiles are now present in virtually every school across the district? Considerations of our considerations of service delivery model that supports special education, first and foremost, do consider how we equitably support student outcomes, their achievement and well-being. There are several important considerations that impact how the SPC model is operationalized across the district, and these do involve significant cross-departmental collaborations. We do make every effort to ensure that classes are geographically distributed across the district. This is to ensure that students are able to access this level of support with proximity to their community environment. This has been more successfully accomplished for specialized program class types where we have a large number of classes. It is certainly more challenging for the types of classes for which we have smaller numbers. The very nature of our SPC model increases the number of school transitions that a student will experience. And this is arguably for a group of students that find school transitions difficult. We have come across examples of students who access their special education program through an SPC that have experienced 4, 5, and even more school transitions prior to entering high school. Analysis of where our classes are located has also shown that they're disproportionately in our English-only schools, where there's traditionally been more flexibility to accommodate these classes. This has led to some of our schools with large number of SPCs and others with none. We have noted the large number of central resources that are required to operationalize this model. It is important to note that it does have a significant impact on our school teams. SPCs in broad terms require significant school-based resources, including admin support, in-school special education teams, the LST, the LRT, as well as multi-D. More recently, in specific areas of the district that are experiencing significant student accommodation pressures. It can, and where schools are at full utilization or even over capacity, it has been difficult to open classes to serve students in that area of the district. Finally, related to transportation, most of our students that access an SPC use small vehicle or van transportation to travel to a school that is outside of their catchment. In recent years, there have been implications due to the driver shortage and finding and also having access to the number of vans required to bring school students to and from these programs. We are also keenly aware of steadily increasing transportation costs and significant amounts of time that students are spending in transportation to access this level of support. With respect to professional assessments, you will find this data in table number 4. We do collect this information annually. It is contained each year in our special education plan that is available publicly and is provided to the Ministry of Education. Our current method for collecting this data is snapshot. The particular data before you tonight was collected in June of 2022. Overall, these numbers are higher than what we would like and what we have seen traditionally. We are still dealing with the carryover effect of the pandemic, where school closures affected the ability to complete these types of assessments. In addition, we do continue to experience reduced service levels from some of our community partners, and there are challenges to continue to fully staff our professional support disciplines, specifically psychology and speech language pathology. It is important to note with these particular trends that they are not unique to this district and they are being experienced across the province. We have been able to capitalize on funding over the last 2 years that has allowed us to contract our own psychology and speech language pathology staff who've been able to complete additional assessments on weekends during the summer and in evenings. So last spring, summer, and fall, this resulted in the completion of an additional 80 psychoeducational assessments and 60 speech language pathology assessments. I would like to note that our current specialized program class service delivery model does affect how our professional support staff works to serve students, notably psychology and speech language pathology. A very significant proportion of this district asset is directed to both the planning and referral process that is associated with specialized program classes. In addition, student assessments are completed most often to inform placement decisions rather than guiding programming and intervention, where our professional support staff have an incredible breadth of knowledge and experience that can inform programming, early intervention, and identification. With our current structures, this is a cycle that is very difficult to break. Decisions related to placement, as we increasingly understand the impact that it has on pathways and credit attainment, cannot be taken lightly and do require assessment information to guide that decision making. This does, however, reduce resources that can be directed at aforementioned things like early identification and intervention, where we know that leads to significant changes and can positively influence student trajectories. Superintendent Simmons started the presentation very openly sharing that we certainly do not have answers to all of the very complex questions that we have posed this evening. This is very complex and layered work that must consider diverse voices and perspectives and has complex impacts on district operations and resource management. And it will certainly require partnerships and allies to evolve and transform systems. We are also tasked with considering this work through a human rights lens. It is the focus of what we affectionately term in LSS as our big work, as we engage in the learning to better understand elements of identity, intersectionality, and positionality in order to identify and disrupt where we find evidence of systemic racism, ableism, and classism in our special education service delivery models. So building on what you've heard tonight, we certainly would like to do a little bit of a preview of work that is underway and will be coming forward both to the Special Education Advisory Committee and to this committee. We are engaged in collaborative work with READ, our Research, Evaluation and Analytics Division, in order to complete a preliminary analysis of an identity disability intersectionality analysis, which we do hope will produce information that will be important to inform the evolution or rebalancing of existing models. We were also successful in securing some application-based ministry funding aimed to remove barriers for students with disabilities and to promote accessible, inclusive, and equitable education practices. A specific project is underway that will look at students with mild intellectual disabilities, MID, that are currently accessing their educational program through the General Learning Program, GLP, Specialized Program class. The program evaluators and LSS will be completing a process evaluation where we will come to better understand how the GLP is influencing student academic and social outcomes. The learning of this particular project, we are hoping will both support and inform work related to other exceptionalities. And finally, work is underway that is looking at programming for students with complex developmental profiles that are currently receiving their program at the specialized schools, Clifford Bowie and Crystal Bay. And with that, we would certainly invite questions from the committee.
Thank you very much, Manager Kay and Superintendent Simmons, for your report. We will take a brief, first questions. Okay, pardon me. We will take questions. First on the list, I have Trustee Aziz.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for chairing this meeting. I realize it's getting past everyone's bedtime shortly, but I appreciate everyone's patience. And thank you to Learning Support Services, specifically Superintendent Simmons and Manager Kay, A, for being with us tonight, and B, for loaning me your many, many pieces of literature. I have learned so much in such a short period of time. In regard to the report provided this evening, I noticed the wait list in the appendix for ASD and then for evaluations. I'm wondering, do we provide support or support or information for parents and students as they await those evaluations, in the meantime, because it's for example, a 3-month wait. And so that's first of, I think, 3 questions. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Yes, while students are waiting, our school-based multidisciplinary teams are actively working to provide strategies to support the students in experiencing success at the classroom level. In fact, in some cases, we've been successful in changing trajectories of students when those strategies have been effective at the school level without an assessment having been completed. One of our ongoing concerns is an over-reliance on assessment from our professional staff when we could be capitalizing on the professional knowledge and experience that they bring, and having had them, if they are able to spend time getting to know students, getting to know the support systems that are in place, we can often accomplish as much as we can through having had an assessment. Now, I say that not to undervalue the importance of an assessment when necessary, because there are times when it's absolutely required. But if our professional support staff don't have the time to do that, it becomes a wicked problem.
Thank you. And you were already 2 steps ahead of me. So it answers my question on an over-reliance on assessment and providing support. So my final question kind of touches on the preliminary work identified with READ on identity, disability, intersections of data. I'm wondering if we collect, and if we could collect data or potentially add to this work on who gets supports when, who's getting these evaluations, gender differences, ethnicity, so on. Do we collect that data? And if not, can we?
Madam Chair, currently we don't gather that data. The identity-based information is not accessible in the cross-platform between our assessment database and our student database just yet. So it does take the handheld work of our program evaluators along with the expertise in READ to pull that off. Although I will very excitedly note that as a request for moving forward.
Thank you both for being here and answering those questions. That's all, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next on our list, we have Lily Miller.
Hi. There we go. Yeah, I love all the passion and attention you're giving to making sure there is an equity, human rights lens on all this. Just looking at the, I'm just wondering if you apply that when you're selecting who is on the wait list and who gets to move forward. Given that there is, the systemic oppression that has, made many families who may be marginalized unable to seek extra help. I wonder if you have been applying decisions based on equity within that selection process.
Thank you for the question. It's definitely a complex one with several layers, so I'll address it in parts. We don't always have identity information of the students when we are considering a referral to specialized program class. We do have criteria and guidelines that do guide our decision as we are making those really significant decisions about whether a student is best served through a specialized program class. Our school teams, as part of the process, it is a requirement that they are collaborating with parents and caregivers. And so certainly some of that information related to identity may be included in the referral package. And then it's very much considered by the multidisciplinary team that is reviewing that. Your points that you make and those considerations are exactly why we have been doing the work with READ on the identity, disability, intersectionality analysis, because we have anecdotally come to suspect that students from specific identities may be disproportionately represented in some of our special education supports and services, and that it really implores us to understand what the outcomes are for our students that are accessing different levels of our special education service delivery model, and how students of different identities may be responding to those supports. So that is the reason for pursuing that intersectionality analysis. So we have that information to inform decisions moving forward. It's also a piece that we're expanding in our work with our students that do have mild intellectual disabilities currently in our GLP, so that as we are assessing that model, we'll have that identity information to further inform our decision making. And that information will be available to SEAC as well as this committee. So it is a part of our process as we are making those important decisions with respect to the model and how we are equitably aligning our resources to serve student needs.
Next on our list, we have Trustee Kaplan-Murphy.
Thank you, through you, Chair, and thank you to SEAC for all this incredible work. I'm wondering whether acknowledging the intersectionality between identity and disability and the systemic barriers to some families being able to advocate for their children. If you have an analysis that, as others have suggested, looks more at identity, what can we do as trustees to advocate for more resources to be put into the system? I hear the wonderful words that it'll help to direct us, but can we actually do more for our students with disabilities, and particularly for those students who don't have the advantages that some other students might have in terms of getting supports outside of school?
I'd like to start on this because I think it's a great question and it follows on a couple of the other questions. There's always going to be a struggle with how much data do we have and how much data should we collect and how far do we go. And what I think is interesting in this case is if we look at the really great work that the superintendent and manager and their team have done in bringing this report together, what they're getting at is the larger picture lens of how our specialized program classes are structured and what the thinking was when we started this model and how that aligns with our thinking today about education and where we need to go in the future in terms of these models. And how do we get to a special education delivery model that is more inclusive for all students so that we're not so focused on wait lists for kids to get into a program and stay in that program for the duration of their career, but rather getting kids the learning resources and supports they need so that they can be successful in school and in life and in all ways. So we just want to be thinking about some of those big picture things because we can go down a lot of detailed questions, and that's the conversation between the READ team and the LSS team about how far do we go on the intersectionality of data, and if we go that granular, will it tell us so much more for the resource effort relative to the resource allocation and looking at how do we get more inclusive and better programming for kids long term. So they're really, really good questions and they're part of our everyday struggle. And I really commend this team for bringing us to that big picture conversation and appreciate that the questions that you're getting at are many of those things we've always struggled on. And what I really like about this report is what I think Superintendent Simmons said at the start, and that is we need to make sure that we don't, that we remember to challenge ourselves that the status quo is not necessarily the best spot we can be, and that we are finding opportunity and applying that equity lens in a bigger way to this work. And that's what this report seeks to start, a foundation. And it's a long journey for us, but an important one.
Thank you, Director. Next on the list, we have Trustee Lyra.
Hi, Peter. So I'm going to ask some big questions. And so my first question is learning better in congregated classes for students with that exceptionality versus being in an integrated model?
So, Madam Chair, through you, I don't think there is a direct answer to that. Certainly emerging research would identify, there's a meta-analysis out of the US that has reviewed outcomes and pathways for students with mild intellectual disabilities. Other research is pointing to that there doesn't appear to be a significant change in trajectory or outcomes for students who have a mild intellectual disability, whether they are supported in a smaller class ratio or in a regular class. In some cases, it may be advantageous for a student to be able to access the level of supports both from an educator, teacher, or educational assistant, and from the professional support staff who are assigned to support that classroom. So I've kind of talked on both sides of it. In some cases, it might be. In other cases, it might not be. And one of the things that we're trying to do is understand a little bit more about what is the efficacy of our program and how successful are the students who are in specialized program classes.
So you haven't said it, but you certainly spelled it out in this report that, to my reading, the ASD program is struggling with the resources that we have given the high numbers of waitlists. Would you say that's a fair characterization?
I wouldn't characterize it as a resource issue per se. We have accommodation pressures. We have recruitment retention issues for staff. We have transportation pressures as well, which all impact the learning experience of students.
Okay, so it's not just money, it's also staff and transportation availability.
It is, and we also need to get a deeper understanding around the outcomes of students who are currently served through specialized program classes like ASD.
We are running into a budget deficit, as I'm sure you are no doubt aware. So is there a cost differential for us between running these specialized classes and running generalized classes?
Our current specialized program class model is extremely cost intensive. What we haven't costed out yet are models of what it would look like in an inclusive environment to see whether there would be any savings with a model associated with that. The vast majority of our specialized program class model takes up a huge amount of our current resources dedicated to special education.
So in my conversations with my coterminous colleague, they have said that they are now able to put an EA in every classroom with every student who has a special education need. We already have a shortage of EAs. We already have positions we do not fill. How are we planning to fix that if we were to shift models?
Madam Chair, frankly, I would have a lot of concerns with applying a human resources solution to the problem. The fact is that when we think about long-term trajectories for students with special education needs and wanting to build levels of independence, human resources support is among the most difficult, if not the most difficult, to fade. And what we are hoping for is that upon graduating or leaving our system after 21 years, that we have been able to support the student in developing as much independence as possible to set them in good stead for their lives moving forward. So that would not be my immediate reaction, which is to support one-to-one staffing. In fact, there are many cases where it would be contraindicated. So there is mounting evidence that shows not only does it create a dependence on the part of the student on the staff member, but in some cases the codependence between the staff member and the student as well. And we want to make sure that nothing is getting in the way or unanticipated outcomes if that were the approach to be taken.
So we are seeing increasing rates of violence in classrooms, increasing numbers of exclusions where periods where the entire class has to be removed because of behavioral or dysregulation of an individual. Do we have any sort of tangible outcome or measured learning loss that impact is having on students? And if so, do we expect that to increase in a full integration model if that's the direction the board went?
Madam Chair, we know that the pandemic has had a differential impact on families and students in our district. We don't yet know what the final outcome will be of the results of the last couple of years and what the unforeseen impacts might be. But we do continue to work on setting the learning conditions in our classrooms to create the conditions for students to be successful. We continue to augment mental health supports, and by that I mean our professional support staff as well, for sure, but also building the capacity of educators at school level to engage in mental health promotion and prevention. So with those, the plan and working in alignment with School Mental Health Ontario and their pathway forward is that we can start to address some of those things that are emerging, possibly because of the pandemic.
I didn't quite catch the answer to my question, so I'll try and rephrase it. Maybe that'll help. If we were to change to a full integration model, do we expect to see increased rates of violence in classrooms, increased rates of dysregulation, or increased learning loss from their non-special education needs peers?
Madam Chair, I'd have a hard time recommending change to program that I would knowingly cause an increase in those situations that you've described. Before any recommendation like that, switching to a fully integrated model, essentially ripping the Band-Aid, if you will, we would want to make sure we understand to the best of our ability what the impacts of that would be so that we can do our best to mitigate them and resource that decision appropriately.
So like I mentioned earlier, our coterminous board has a different model than us. Do you understand the reasoning this district had when it made the decision to switch or to undergo the model that we chose to?
I can give you my perspective. Some more veteran colleagues around the table may have additional information to share. But the specialized program class model was established by a predecessor board, and that amalgamation was maintained. As Manager Kay mentioned, numbers were dramatically smaller at that time. And I can only imagine, because people in education don't want poor outcomes for students, that the belief at that time was that it was the best way to support students with complex special education needs. The landscape has changed, research has shifted, practices have shifted. I have no doubt we continue to require a continuum of special education programs and services, including special education classes, but to what scope and scale and the nature of the profile of students who are being placed in those classrooms, I don't have an absolute answer to that. And as we've indicated as well, we definitely need to understand what are the unanticipated outcomes that we just haven't examined to date. For example, are we disproportionately impacting boys from low socioeconomic status families in behavior intervention programs? Certainly that would be what is reflective in other districts. And it's a factor that we want to understand at a deeper level at our level.
Okay. Last question, and that is, with the cancellation of the Ontario Autism Program, the school board was sort of the fallback for a lot of families. Have you seen an increase in demand for the program or an increase in need amongst people within the program with the cancellation of the Ontario Autism Program?
I think I'll turn to Manager Kay.
Thank you, Superintendent Simmons. A complex question, Trustee Lyra. My understanding is that the characterization would not be the cancellation of the Ontario Autism Program. I think they've shifted how they're structuring that. So certainly our colleagues in the department that work very closely with providers such as CHEO and other agencies across that there's an entry to school program that is funded through the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services. And they have shifted the models by which families can access funding to purchase various supports and services for their child. So there are definitely, there continue to be programs and funding options for families that do have children with autism, but you are correct in that there have been significant shifts in recent years, and that definitely would have had an impact on our families. The pandemic also, as I mentioned earlier, it impacted our ability to provide services to students. It also had that same impact to our community partners. And so certainly we have recognized students who are entering our district who have had less access to preschool supports and services than what we've had in the past. We've also had students that are presenting with complex developmental profiles that haven't had access to assessment, for example, through preschool programs that traditionally in the past would have been in place. So that has certainly had an impact on resources and how we are best supporting those students once they are with us at school.
Sorry, you said purchased?
I'm not sure I said purchased. It's possible.
Statement, you said purchased. When talking about the Ontario Autism Program.
Oh, services. Yes. So I don't pretend to be an expert with the full scope and nature of OAP structures, but certainly in past iterations, families were provided with funding by which they could then purchase service through various private providers to create service plans that were customized to the needs of their particular child.
I see. Thank you.
All right. Next on our list, we have Seema Lamba.
Thank you. I'm going to leave my video off because I can hear better when it's off. My question, I think it builds on maybe the last one. At past COW meetings, we heard that students with disabilities have a higher proportion of discipline in the schools and a lower rate of success in graduating. So I was curious to know, and if I'm inaccurate on that, please clarify that, but that's just my understanding. So how is this addressing those issues? Like to decrease the level of discipline and increase the level of success in, graduating and so on.
I'm going to start, and I'm sure the superintendent will have something to add. I think the first thing I need to clarify in this is a report that really explains the specialized program class model and offers some opportunity to think about that model and what our wait lists are, et cetera. There is no recommendation in this report. It's not going any particular place, and there is no immediate action that is going to turn us from one delivery model to another. As we go into our strategic planning process, we're going to need to think about our priorities. And this is a good example of a strategic initiative that you might work on over the course of a plan, that you want to think about program delivery models, and that you want to think about ways that we can take our human rights and equity agenda and build that into how we approach the delivery of special education programs and program classes, among other things. So I say that because there are a few questions that are getting at an either or solution, and we're a long way from that. We regularly report to you with data about specialized program classes and wait lists, which is historically a pretty kind of operational metric kind of report. And what we wanted to do was bring a report that was a little bit more to your responsibilities from a policy perspective and to inform your thinking from a strategy perspective. So to that, I say to the question that I'm not sure that this report is going to change anything, except that what I think it is a really wonderful conversation with lots of rich input for us to go away and reflect on and think about what is the next place for a conversation. How do we take some of the listening and build that into future reports and thinking, and what are the areas that we would need to go deeper in order to be able to answer the kinds of questions that are surfacing in tonight's conversation. So I don't know if the superintendent has something to add there, but hopefully that gets at least in part to the question.
Thank you, Director, and I'd agree completely. Our intent here is a foundational kind of discussion to initiate things and some thinking. I think I said it in this one, maybe it was SEAC, I can't remember now, but we're dealing with some pretty significant, large scale, high level issues that we want to engage in a conversation with stakeholders about because we don't have the answer. If I had the answer, I'd come to you and say, this is what I think we need to do. But we are digging our way through this, and we're inviting you along for that journey with us. So really appreciate the conversation, because all of it, and the SEAC began it, is helping to inform us in our thinking and guiding us as we move forward.
Thank you very much. Trustee Aziz, I do see you as a second time speaker. However, we do have first time speaker Lynn Scott first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Superintendent Simmons referred to some of the past practices in response to the question about why do we have the model we do. Having been a parent in both of our predecessor boards, I can say that both of them had specialized classes for special education students, but they did it differently. In one district, the one that actually was much better funded, they relied much more heavily on specialized class placements to serve special education students. In the other board, which had less funding, they did have some specialized classes, but they were seen much more as a short-term placement of 2 to 4 years, which gave students, helped students develop the skills and independence they'd need to be more successful in a regular class. And there was also reliance on in-school resources like resource rooms and so on. After the amalgamation, there was an increasing focus on how do we change this? How do we make it all work together? And we ended up in a position of having more specialized classes than we had previously. Part of that came along with the change in needs, because we were seeing many more high needs students for whom specialized class placement seemed to be a good thing. And there were enough of them that it became a reasonable thing to do if you could cluster enough kids together in one place. Meanwhile, there were always some special needs students in regular classes, and they were, but it was a bit hit and miss in terms of how well served they were, because some teachers just naturally, without having necessarily any specialized training in it, understood how to differentiate instruction in such a way that every kid in their class was learning at their own level, in their own speed, in their own way. We are not as willing now to accept the luck of the draw when it comes to having differentiated instruction. And I think one of the really important things about this report is that it forces us to think very hard about what actually does happen if you have students in a regular class in a school, because maybe they're going to have one of those miracle teachers who can just do it all, but maybe they won't. And so how do we even that out so that every classroom is able to do the appropriate differentiation? And is that differentiation going to be sufficient to meet the needs of all of our special education students? All of the research says you need a continuum approach. And I think that's one of the things that Superintendent Simmons has said here. I think that how we organize that continuum is something we need to think about to make the best use of the resources that we actually have, because we have a lot of kids in need and those needs have changed over time. So I really appreciate this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Scott. I was more than happy to continue over the allotted time because there's some excellent comments you've just made. On our second time speaker list, we have Trustee Aziz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And in keeping with the much anticipated break, I will ask a quick question because I think this conversation is getting us all, I think particularly Peter and Stacey giddy, because this is really exciting commentary to have and to have these conversations. I guess my question is, building on this report and looking into some of the guiding questions about the next school year and so forth, would it be possible to ask LSS to look into what an inclusive education model would be for the board, implications, costs, etc.? Because this is really interesting in terms of the concerns raised, as highlighted by my fellow trustees. because as strategic planning is coming up and as we think about the long-term implications of post-pandemic, et cetera, I think that would be really, really helpful.
Madam Chair, so we don't have the answer yet, so we don't know which model to cost out. But just today, Manager Kay and I had a conversation around possibly considering some models for discussion. At the same time, though, we in LSS also have some other big pieces of work that's going on. And I wouldn't want to put the brakes on, for example, our identity disability intersectionality work that we're engaged in. We only have a limited amount of time to look at our work with students who have multiple intellectual disabilities. So there are some of those things. We've made a commitment to the students and staff and parents and caregivers at Crystal Bay and Clifford Valley to come out with some things. So I'm not saying no, but I'm saying in time, because we don't want to rush anything. The last thing I want anyone to do is walk away from here thinking they've got it figured out and they're giving us a snow job, because that ain't the case. This is some big thinking. So thank you for the comment, and we will certainly consider it in moving forward.
I think what we can commit to is recognition that there's interest in a continued conversation. And so we'll need to think about timing for that, but also it's not necessarily a one-step piece. As the superintendent mentioned, there's lots of other work on the go. And so as we do that other work, we continue to think and refine and make sure that we're reflecting in that. But we'll definitely think about how and when we continue this conversation.
Thank you.
With SEAC as well.
All right. Next on our list, we have Trustee Kaplan-Murphy.
Oh, thank you. Through you, Chair. I actually just, I think that many of my follow-up questions from before have already been asked now by Chair Evans and by Trustee Aziz and others. What I was really trying to ask before is how we can advocate for the resources that we need for whichever model, or if we can show that there are better outcomes with certain models that will address equity issues, are there actually resources that we can advocate for, especially given that we know that there's such a shortage of EAs, and we know that there's such a resource crunch. So my question was a very practical one, which was, how do we need to advocate? Who do we need to advocate to when we do have a better sense of what would really help our students? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the comment, and absolutely there are avenues through now I'm trying to remember the name of the trustee organization. OCDSB. Thank you. To as a key source for trustees to advocate for. Many of you also have your own individual contacts at various levels that you may want to explore as well. But at the same time, we need to have a good idea of what we're advocating for. And we need to consolidate our thinking a little bit more so that we're not kind of spitballing this and going after everything, but going with it in kind of a focused kind of way. So I think the answer to that question, trustee, will come through subsequent conversations. Certainly, you're not going to get an argument from me in terms of wanting to advocate tonight. But I think in order to be effective, we want to be considering, or you would want to be considering, how to do that most effectively in a way that's going to get heard amongst the stakeholders in the province.
I think that's a great answer. And I just would note, I hadn't thought about the OCDSB avenue, but I noticed that OCDSB is doing some consultation on its own strategic priorities, and trustees would have received that survey from them. So there is an opportunity for you to make sure that, you know, this remains a priority on the OCDSB list of priorities. So think about that as an avenue. We'll have our own advocacy committee meeting in the spring, and there's additional spaces, as the superintendent explained.
Chair Lyra.
The other place that we sort of have to think about is that we are a decision-making body. If we decide we want to allocate more funding to the special education portfolio, we can do that, acknowledging that it has to come from somewhere else in our budget. And so if we want to prioritize special education, we can try and do that, but it will be at the cost of one of the other programs or multiple of the other programs that we have chosen to run. And so, yes, we can advocate to the province for additional money, but there's also going to be hard conversations around the table about what we want to prioritize as a district. And we're going to have to think about that moving into the budget process.
Thank you, Chair Lara. Those are some excellent points and questions that everyone has raised. Some great food for thought for us to take into our 10-minute recess. So the time is now 9:49. We will meet back here in 10 minutes. Thank you. Okay. Good to go. I would now like to call upon Director Giroux to introduce report 23-016.
Thank you very much. We are continuing our strategic planning conversation, and we have the next piece of the environmental scan here for discussion, and I'm going to invite Strategic Business Analyst Andrea Rahim to share the update, and Manager Stacey Kay, I think, has joined her because she's supporting the consultation in schools on this project. So over to you, folks.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I believe I do have some slides, if we can get those pulled up as well. So the purpose of this evening is to give a bit of an update in terms of where we are in the strategic planning process, as well as some time to reflect on the next iteration of the environmental scan and address any questions that you have. In terms of our consultation, I would love to start by saying what an exciting process it has been so far and how powerful it has been to really hear the stories of those members of our community who've been engaging in this process. So I'd like to start by acknowledging all of the people who've come out and engaged in the process so far and say thank you to them and what a positive experience it's been to hear the thank yous from the people who are really appreciative of us making the time and the space for them to have the opportunity to share their stories. As a reminder for our consultation, we've got 4 main streams. So if we can hop to slide 3, thank you. So we have our one-to-one conversations. We have over 130 of those that are either scheduled or currently being scheduled. As of yesterday, we had 23 summary reflections completed. So just a reminder to the trustees that an important part of engaging in those conversations is to submit that summary reflection afterwards as an opportunity for me to consolidate the feedback and capture the stories that you're hearing as you're having those conversations. As well, we've got our small group conversations, which have been happening through our advisory committees, through community partners, and which have been happening organically throughout the district as well. So far, we've received submissions from a number of our advisory committees, such as the Special Education Advisory Committee, Student Senate, Parent Advisory Committee, as well as some groups of teachers that are getting together and using the toolkit to facilitate conversations and share feedback with us, and even groups of students. So, for example, a group of students in the Rainbow Club at one of our schools, taking the initiative, using the toolkit, having a conversation, and then sharing that feedback with us. So seeing some great information coming in there in terms of the sharing of the stories of our community. As well, we've got our large group meetings. We had our virtual public meeting last week, which had around 50 participants, as well as 2 staff-specific virtual meetings, which in total across the 2 had about another 50 participants from the staff community as well. So again, a great opportunity to have a bit of an introduction to the strategic planning process, have some breakout rooms where we got to have some conversations, and then where we had the chance to regroup and wrap up with some reflection. In addition to these 4 streams, we are currently in the planning stages for our school-based meetings as well. All of the trustees should have received information from Manager Kay about those 6 schools that have been identified for those consultations and the dates for those. Please don't forget to let Manager Guthrie know if you're able to attend any of those. And so for the environmental scan, a reminder that this is a compilation of data that creates a profile of the organization, and then is really intended to serve as a resource document, which shares highlights and then directs you to the data for more information. So what you see on the slides of the environmental scan really is some key pieces of data and some observations that we've pulled out, but we do encourage you to use the links provided to dig more and find out more information. So last committee of the whole, we talked about the OCDSB as an organization and our students, and tonight we're really focused on the section on our staff. So we've included some demographic information. Some highlights here are that our staff speak over 35 languages. They are a multi-faith community, and the majority of our staff identify as white and as female. In the report, we do make some comparisons to the student population and highlight characteristics where staff are overrepresented or overrepresentative of our student population. For example, only 18% of our staff identify as racialized compared to 49% of our students. We also have data looking at staff engagement. Nearly 2/3 of the respondents in a staff survey indicated that they are proud to work for the OCDSB. In the environmental scan, we provide some insight on who is less engaged, and we look at factors such as race, employee group, and length of service. To assess staff well-being, we've included data on absence rates, as well as qualitative data from last year's thought exchange. In looking at this data, we need to be mindful of the context, particularly of COVID, including things such as increased sensitivity to illness and burnout felt not just among staff, but across society as a whole. This doesn't mean that this data isn't valuable. It just means that there are other factors that we want to be keeping in mind when we're interpreting this survey data, given the timing of the administration. And finally, in the environmental scan, we report on some data for staffing and vacancies with a specific look at unfilled vacancies. And again, this needs to be considered in context, and many of the challenges that you will see on slide 36 of the report are not just OCDSB specific, but again, are seen more broadly. And so I'll leave you with some questions for reflection and open it up to questions for the group, and asking you to consider about what the data tells us about our strengths as a district, about our areas for improvement, gaps that need to be addressed, and what results and trends we are seeing that may have surprised you. So I'll turn it over to questions and go from there.
Thank you very much for that. First on our speakers list, we have Trustee Aziz.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you again to folks working on this, and thank you to all the staff who've been here tonight answering our billions of questions. This is all really important work, and I really appreciate. I can't say that enough. Really appreciate the hard work that's gone in all of this reporting. I guess my question is to highlight. You mentioned that a lot of these issues that were highlighted on slide 36 are not unique to our district. However, on slide 33, we do see some quotes about where staff have highlighted they would like more support. And I'm wondering if we collect qualitative data on or take in suggestions from staff on where we can do better. Just because to me, I'm no expert on staffing and long-term retention of staff, so forth, and perhaps Superintendent Hall has a better response on understanding the context of this feedback in the strategic plan and long-term staff retention and addressing mental health workload, etc.
So I can start, and then I'll pass it over to Superintendent Hall to elaborate. I will say we did collect a large amount of qualitative employee feedback. in particular during the pandemic. The quotes that you're seeing on that slide are from a thought exchange that we did, and we did multiple of those over the course as we transitioned in and out of learning online. And there were a lot of changes that happened as a result of that feedback. And one that I would like to highlight in particular was around staff communication. So one of the things that we heard regularly throughout those exchanges was the desire for more information and streamlined information. So staff were looking for transparency and for resources. And as a result, we were really able to enhance our internal communications and a lot of those practices that have carried over and are strong right now. So things that I like to call the COVID keepers, the things that arose out of COVID, but that are worth hanging on to after the fact. So the communications was a big one that we were able to take action from that feedback and move forward. So I don't know if.
So a couple of other things we can touch on. In 2021, we undertook an employee engagement survey, which was a pretty large undertaking, which included engagement and sense of belonging. And that data was just reported on in November 2021. So it was just a year ago in the fall. And so we've been looking at that data and continuing a lot of work we've been doing over the last year has been in response to that data. So that's a piece of it. I don't think that Andrew mentioned in the context of your question, but I think she mentioned earlier that last week we held 2 sessions with employees on the strat plan, and we'll continue that. So those are some formalized collection methods, but there are also a number of other spots where we have collaborative tables, where there's regular contact and engagement opportunities to talk about. So program and learning, as an example, uses a collaborative table model regularly so that we're getting feedback and input into some of that decision making in real time. And of course, we regularly connect with our principals and managers and get their feedback back directly. I don't know if the superintendent has anything else in particular she wants to add to the conversation.
If you don't like my answer, I'm trustee Aziz. So the only other addition I would make is that we regularly meet with our federation partners and hear from them, and are able to gain a lot of very insightful feedback about the issues around well-being and engagement from our staff on particular issues with particular employees. So that is not a formal mechanism for the most part, although there could be formal meetings. We do work with a collaborative table through Superintendent Sinclair and the labor relations team as well, to really try to understand the pulse of the issues employees are experiencing. So that happens almost on a daily basis, depending on the issue and or concern that employees bring forward. No, that's perfect. Thank you all for answering my question.
Next on our list, we have Trustee Dixon.
Thank you, Chair. I'm trying to look to see like the percentage of the racialized youth, like, or staff that's answering this. It looks like they're not even really giving a feedback. Are you concerned that you're not getting as much feedback from them? Like, because I'm trying to find the percentage, right? It's pretty low. Like, it looks like -4%. I'm not sure if I'm reading it right.
Clarify which slide you're looking at. 19?
Is it 19?
So I think the percentage that you're looking at is the difference compared to the overall.
Okay.
So when you see a negative, you would be looking at it, it would be a particular line in a table. So whichever line item that is, that's the difference between that group and the overall sample. So for example, I don't know where the -4 is, but if you were looking at sense of belonging, it would be saying that their sense of belonging,
they don't have any. they don't feel it, right?
4% less than the rest of the respondents. It's in comparison to the average for the survey, not -4 overall.
I know, but it's still concerning, right? That they don't, like, aren't you concerned, or it's.
So I think it might be helpful. What you're looking at there is an extract from the school climate survey data. And appreciate that the table as an extract doesn't give you that base information. So what might be helpful is if we share the link to the main report, and then you'll be able to go a little bit deeper and see what how it compares.
And that should be the link that's in that top corner of that slide, or the one previous.
Yes, thanks.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on our list, we have Trustee Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate the chance to ask some questions about this. One thing that I noticed was in the staffing and vacancies piece, there's a reference to safety. That's on slide 36. And exposure to violent incidents as a staffing challenge. But safety isn't only the issue of violent incidents. Safety is also the daily experience of microaggressions that some people have, and a host of other things. So I guess, do we have any information on how those other aspects of safety play into this? And are there things we should be thinking about trying so that we can alleviate some of that? Or is that already part of our current work that we really just need to work harder at?
I wonder if Superintendent Hall, I can't see her, but maybe wants to speak about the factors of psychologically safe workspaces.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, so we do have a couple of ways in which we look at safety beyond, as you pointed out, Trustee Scott, safety in terms of dysregulation or violent incidents in classrooms and schools. We have a committee for engaged and healthy workplace conversations. That committee in particular has representatives from our Federation partners, but also with staff. And we look at the CSA standard for psychologically safe workspaces. And in those conversations, that's where we drill down to talk about things that are happening and different supports and services that we need to enhance or add to address the issues that are brought forward. Because as you pointed out, safety isn't just, physical safety. It extends far beyond that. And that psychological safety is core to the need of our employees.
Yeah, I think that's something we need to consider, because it's not just something that happens necessarily among people in the school. It also happens with people who come into the school. There can be difficult encounters sometimes with parents and community members as well. So I think we need to take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next on our list, we have Seema Lama.
Hi again. I just have a quick request because I know there are many new trustees and other representatives on COW. The links, I appreciate the links in the report. But just because I've been on COW before and sometimes it's hard to find them, is it possible to send the committee members the actual reports, the links to the full report? Because even, what's presented here and what's presented on the link is selective. And I think it would be very, very useful and important for everyone, the trustees and members to actually have the full report. Both on the student engagement and belonging and the staff one and other reports that are mentioned and highlighted. I say that because there's, things that are highlighted that I may not have highlighted myself and would have highlighted other things. So it's very subjective. Is it possible to provide that?
So I think what we can look at doing, you'll see that where we link to the full report, usually on the slide for that section, it says click here for a detailed link, and that'll take you to the student engagement piece, et cetera. What we can look at doing, and I look to Andrea to see, is putting at the end of the document bibliography of the links, and then it'll be clear what the report is and how you link to it.
Yeah, as long as it's the full, because when I click on the links in the report, they're not the full report, they're just summaries, they're highlights. So I'm actually like the full report it would be great. Thank you.
Yeah. So in response to that, you are correct. Some of the times it does bring you to a summary of highlights, and then an additional link will bring you to a full report. So I think it's a excellent suggestion that for the next iteration of this and moving forward, I'll include a couple of slides at the end of the presentation that clearly identify whether you're linking to a summary report that we shared as an executive summary or the full report, and then both versions will be there for you to click and explore. Because I do agree, pulling out highlights of some of these extensive reports can be challenging, and there's multiple areas to focus on. So
yeah,
I'll make sure those are included.
And it just doesn't provide sort of the equity piece. Like there's areas that you are highlighting equity, but then there's other areas you're not, but it's in the other reports, in the fuller report. So I think it's important too. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Next on our list, we have Trustee Kaplan-Murphy.
Thank you. Through you. So I'm thinking about the slide 25, looking at the staff demographic data. And I'm wondering, because what we need to know in terms of developing new strategic priorities is what is our current active strategy or mechanism to address equity, diversity, and inclusivity in hiring and promotion policies for our board. If we are not adequately representing our population in terms of race, ethnicity, gender identity, even disability, then in order to improve upon those strategies, I just want clarification on what we're currently doing to address issues in terms of inclusivity in hiring and promotion.
Thank you for the question. Time flies, so I hope I'm not getting it wrong when I say last year, but maybe it was the year prior. This board spent quite a bit of time working on an equitable hiring and recruitment policy, and Superintendent Hall can touch a little bit on some of the key strategies and recruitment initiatives that are underway in response to that.
No. Okay. Thank you. Through you, Chair. That's a great question and something near and dear to my heart. We, as the director has pointed out, we have already passed and implemented the policy and procedure on hiring, recruitment, hiring, and promotion for staff. And that has set a foundation of the core work and the direction that the district is moving in to ensure that we have a diverse and representative workforce that reflects the identities of the students in our schools. And one of the great things about this data set in the staff survey is that we're able to really begin to understand the people who work for us, their identities, and where we can see areas that we need to focus to enhance and improve that diversity in all of our staff. One of the cautions I would say with the data that is provided in the survey is that it wasn't a population survey. So not every single employee filled it out. People own their identity. It's for them to own, for them to share when and how they want to share it. And so I guess respectfully, we don't have a full sense of everyone who works for us and how they identify because, you know, it's only our right to know if they're willing to share that with us. So I would say that not because I know whether or not it would enhance the diversity, but I think we can reasonably assume it would provide higher numbers than what exists. But at the core of your question is what are we doing to enhance you know, our employees from different backgrounds and diverse identities. So an extension of the work that we've been doing in implementing our equitable policy and procedure for hiring, recruitment, retention, and promoting I would encourage trustees to take a look at the procedure and the details that are in there. And from there, we built a draft framework that's going to be a public, more accessible public facing document that really gets at the core tasks that are required to be undertaken when we are engaging in recruiting and hiring. And those details, based in the procedure and policy, are guidelines for our staff to really address barriers, remove biases, and to have a structured process that benefits those with diverse identities, to really encourage them and to have them look at us as an employer that respects who they are and engages them in the way they want to be engaged as an employee. And that is in draft. It's pretty close to being completed. So we will be excited to share that with you when that's done, and the training piece that will go with all staff. But there are continual programs that we do and supports, like continuous training of hiring managers, staff, principals, vice principals, managers, supervisors on the policy, on the procedure and the requirements that we have. We've updated the language. If you see any promotion, any job postings right now, you'll see language in there that really reflects our core work in attracting diverse employees to our organization, and always includes that that invitation for requesting accessibility and supports. And they can look anyway if somebody needs a bit more support in with interviews, or the style in which they need to access that, or if there's transportation issues. We're looking at communicating with people the ways in which we really want to bring them to our organization. So that work, as I said, is far from done. It needs a lot more work, but we're very committed to doing it. And I'm really excited and hopeful with the work we've been doing, and to seeing that if we do this survey again in a couple of years, that hopefully we have more people participate. They see the value in participating, and also that we see more reflective workforce compared to the students that we serve. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Next on our speakers list, we have Trustee Nash.
Hi, through you. Thank you, Chair. Through you. Educational assistants, 30% average unfilled. Clearly, there must be a number of reasons for that. What would you say is the primary reason for this shortage? And the second part of that question is, what's the plan? I mean, in terms of, because this is a huge gap, and probably is what we're seeing in some of the issues that we're having in schools in terms of dysregulation and so forth, and other things that are happening in our schools. Clearly, that's one of the main reasons right there. So, thank you.
I think that, sorry, did you? Yeah.
I was only going to pass to Superintendent Hall.
Exactly.
Through you, Chair, I will also offer Manager Kay to speak to the EA question if she has anything to add following, as EAs and understanding their needs is core to the work of LSS. So as we've shared with the board, one of the challenges that we face in terms of retaining some staff, specifically some staff in collective bargaining groups, such as EAs, is that the rate of pay is a centrally negotiated item, and that our ability to make changes to that as a school board do not exist in this current model. So one of the important pieces for us to understand is that when you have a market such as we do in Ottawa, with multiple school districts that offer similar employment opportunities, but at a higher rate of pay than what our board is able to offer, we see that competition, that driver of competition, draws employees to other opportunities. So I would say if there was one major factor, it is that we cannot go in and make changes to the pay structure of educational assistants to make it more competitive with other school districts in the local area. But I will say, it's my understanding that across the province, this is an issue. I don't think EA shortages in general is specific to our school district, but that is something that exists in other places. I would offer Manager Kay if she has anything to add to that.
Thank you, Superintendent Hall. I think you've done an excellent job of addressing some of the structural issues and where locally as a school district, we have less areas of control. Certainly, we regularly work cross-departmentally with our partners in people, culture and leadership, working on some of the areas with respect to our educational assistants that we do have control over. One recent example that comes to mind was a professional development opportunity that where we did host 400 EAs from across our district for a full day of professional learning, various topics. We had over 38 presenters from our professional support services and central staff. So opportunities like that, when we can seize them, like through professional development days, go a long way for providing EAs with the skills and competencies to engage in the very difficult work that we're asking them to do, and contributes to their wellness and success in the work environment. And certainly we know, based on a lot of the research, that certainly does contribute to retention.
During the some of the strategic consultations.
Trustee Nash, my apologies to the interruption. The time is 10:30 and we do need to call a vote. Sure. I apologize for the interruption. So the time is 10:30. We do need to call a vote whether we will continue the meeting or not. So I would like to call the vote on that. All those in favor of continuing the meeting past 10:30. All those opposed. Okay. So this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you very much for your time, everyone.
All right, Andrew.